Thank you all for joining us this evening. It's really a pleasure to be with you all tonight. This event is called Surviving State Violence, the case of Dr. Aafia Siddiqui and incarceration in women's prisons. And we have an amazing panel tonight that's going to talk about Dr. Siddiqui as well as the issues of women's incarceration overall in our country. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. So first, to start off really quick with who I am. My name is ML Smith. I am the founder of an organization called Missouri Justice Coalition. I am in and from Missouri. I am a criminal punishment systems impacted organizer, abolitionist, and activist who experienced incarceration during the COVID pandemic. So I am very well aware of the intimate realities of incarceration, what that does to women, and why we need to organize and advocate and fight back. And so I'm going to go ahead and start with our panel tonight, introductions for them. And of course, when they speak, they're going to go a little bit more into their history, their work, and why they're joining us tonight, which we definitely appreciate everybody for being, a panelist with us. First, we're going to talk to Tanya Siddiqui. Tanya is an attorney and founder and executive director of the Texas People's Tribunal. Her work focuses on creating and implementing effective strategies against state violence. She has led both regional and international movement-centered initiatives. Tanya is the editor of the editor of Without Just Cause, the case of U.S. held political prisoner Dr. Aafia Siddiqui. Kaylee Johnson is also joining us this evening. Kaylee is a Texas-based freelance journalist. Her work includes investigations into FMC Carswell, which is Federal Medical Center in Carswell, Texas. And her work involves uncovering systemic issues in the Texas criminal justice system, following social justice movements in North Texas and stories centering on vulnerable populations. Next, joining us this evening is Kendra Drysdale. Kendra is a motivational speaker and an advocate for transformative justice, trauma healing, and rehabilitation. She was a part of the class action lawsuit against FCI Dublin, which is Federal Correctional Institution Dublin in California, and is a survivor advocate with the California Coalition of Women Prisoners and the Dublin Prison Solidarity Committee. And lastly, we have Diana Block. Diana is a longtime feminist, abolitionist, social justice activist. She is a founder and active member of the California Coalition for Women's Prisoners and the Dublin Prison Solidarity Coalition. Diana is also an author and writes for online journals. You can learn more about her work at dianablock.com. So those are the bios of our amazing panelists tonight. Looking forward to hearing from all of them. So we're going to go ahead and kick it over to Tanya, and she's going to talk to us about her work with Dr. Aafia Siddiqui.
Thanks so much, ML. Hi, everybody who's joining us tonight. I'm really grateful to be a part of this discussion and really appreciative that this event is taking place during March. This year, March coincides with the blessed month of Ramadan. For those of us who are Muslim, it's a time of deep reflection and an opportunity to assess how we can better ourselves to better our communities. International Women's Day is celebrated on March 8th, commemorating women workers for their contributions to furthering liberation efforts. This month, March 2025, also marks the 22nd year that Aafia and her family's lives were permanently altered. Tonight, I want to share information about Dr. Aafia, a Pakistani-Muslim woman, explain how she ended up at FMC Carswell, and shed light on how she's been treated at the only federal medical prison for women in the United States, which is notoriously known as the Hospital of Horrors. The legal injustice that plagues Aafia's case began in 2003 when she and her children at the time, these are their ages as well, Ahmed, who was 5 years old, Mariam, who was 3 years old, and Suleiman, who was 6 months old, were in a taxi in Karachi, Pakistan, heading to the airport to fly to Islamabad. Aafia, an educator who received her PhD from Brandeis University in cognitive neurosciences, was going to meet with the Education Ministry to discuss her ideas for Pakistan's education system. Along the way, their taxi was stopped. Aafia's kidnappers forcibly removed her from the car. Her children were dealt with in the following manner. Suleiman, who was in Aafia's arms, was thrown to the ground and left for dead. This was the last time Aafia or anyone else saw 6-month-old Suleiman, and he's presumed dead. The kidnappers took Ahmed from Karachi, Pakistan to Kabul, Afghanistan, and put him in a juvenile prison. According to Aafia's attorney, Clive Stafford Smith, they told him that his name was no longer Ahmed Siddiqui, it was Ali, and if he ever said that it was Siddiqui, they would kill him. Ahmed was confined to that prison for 5 years until Dr. Fawzia, Aafia's sister and the leader of the Aafia movement, was able to locate him. To find Ahmed, Fawzia contacted humanitarian organizations and provided them with family pictures. A woman working with the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, identified someone who looked like Ahmed in an Afghan prison. The woman from the ICRC showed Ahmed the pictures and asked if he recognized Fawzia in a photo. He told the woman that he did not recognize her and that his name was Ali. As the woman was leaving, Ahmed asked her if he could keep Fawzia's picture. After learning about this encounter, Fawzia called the prison to talk to Ahmed. Ahmed was close to his aunt Fawzia and called her Ada, a term of endearment that he made up. During their conversation, Ahmed called Fawzia this name, which led to his reunion with his family. Mariam, Aafia's middle child, was taken from Pakistan to Afghanistan and forcibly adopted into a white Christian American family by, and this is what her attorney Clive shared, a guy named Josh and a woman named Natalie. Mariam was reunited with her family in 2010 when she was dropped outside of Fawzia's house in Karachi with a tag around her neck bearing Fawzia's address. After being kidnapped, Aafia was held in a secret prison, which including the notorious Bagram U.S. Air Base, where she endured unimaginable acts of violence. After years of secret confinement, Aafia reappeared in 2008, but was taken into custody again, this time for baseless charges related to an incident that took place on July 18, 2008, when she allegedly attempted to shoot at U.S. personnel. During the supposed exchange, Aafia was the only person shot, not once, but twice. To treat her gunshot wounds, Aafia was taken to the Craig Joint Theater Hospital at Bagram Air Base, the same place where she was tortured for numerous years. Reportedly, Aafia, and this is, I'm quoting this from an article called The Intelligence Factory, if anybody's interested in reading it. Aafia was a 3 on the 15-point Glasgow coma scale, meaning she was dead. The surgeons opened her up from breastbone to belly button, searching for bullets. They cut out 20 centimeters of her small intestine. They also gave her transfusions of red blood cells and fresh frozen platelets, and doused her with clotting medication, which suggests she had experienced heavy blood loss. According to her lawyer, the U.S., without any legal jurisdiction, shot and flew Aafia, a Pakistani citizen, from Afghanistan to the U.S. without any extradition proceedings. In 2010, Aafia was convicted and sentenced to 86 years in U.S. federal prison. Despite a complete lack of forensic evidence and no credible witness testimony. Sarah Flounders, co-director of the International Action Center, attended Aafia's trial and described it as a farce. Since her sentencing, Aafia has been confined at the Hospital of Horrors and continues to face incredible harm. She has been held in solitary confinement for over 14 years. According to her lawyer, this is longer than any person in a U.S. federal prison for women. She's been kept from practicing her faith, even when religious leaders like Imam Omar Suleiman have offered to minister her. Aafia has also endured both sexual and physical abuse by state actors. Her attorney has stated that Carswell prison staff have raped her countless times. Aafia has been denied medical and psychological care despite suffering severe trauma and physical injuries. Often when I share information about Aafia, people will tell me that it's hard to advocate for her because of how her case has been framed. Aafia's legal injustice started during the height of the global war on terror. Despite being innocent and having never been convicted, let alone charged with any act of terrorism, news media outlets labeled her as Lady Al-Qaeda and Mom Al-Qaeda, essentially painting her as a bad victim. In these moments, I think about Aafia's captivity and measure it by the timeline of my own life. Sorry. I was in elementary school when she was kidnapped, middle school when she reappeared and was shot twice, and high school when she was given her unjust sentence. I'm now a licensed attorney. The inhumane treatment and captivity that Aafia has endured has surpassed my childhood and adolescence and continues well into my adulthood. Isn't it time that we demand justice for Aafia? Aafia's case is extraordinary for several reasons, but it parallels abuse and neglect that countless others endure at the Hospital of Horrors. Optics should not determine whether someone is worthy of safety or redress. It's wrong that Aafia is held without just cause, and it's wrong that she and others who are confined at FMC Carswell endure unbelievable acts of violence at the hands of government employees. Before I turn it to Kaylee, I just want to show the audience some photos that Aafia's team, the Aafia movement, shared with us. Carlos, if you could pull them. Just for time purposes, I won't go through all of them, but the photo of her with a dog in the black and white photo is her during her childhood in Zambia with a dog named Shaggy. There's another photo, her with her mother, Aafia Siddiqui. Behind both of them is a sign that says Harvard. And then there's a photo of her with her sister, Dr. Fawzia. And I just wanted to give everybody a moment to see these photos. And then the next slide. And then these are photos of her children from their childhood. So the baby that Aafia is holding is Suleiman, and then the two kids in the other photo are Ahmed and Mariam. So that's, I wanted to share that. But yes, I will now pass it to Kaylee.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. As ML said, my name is Kaylee Johnson. I'm a freelance reporter in Fort Worth, Texas, and I focus primarily on criminal justice, especially federal prison conditions and other vulnerable populations who are incarcerated. And I wanted to talk today about FMC Carswell, where, as was mentioned, Aafia Siddiqui is. FMC Carswell is a federal medical prison in Fort Worth. So that means, and it's the only federal medical prison for women in the country. So that means that from across the country, women who, and other people who are sentenced might be sent specifically to Carswell to get treatment for everything from mental health issues to cancer treatments. It houses about 1,200 people, and I've been talking to women at the facility for about 6 years. The term Hospital of Horrors came about in 2005 by investigative journalist Betty Brink. When she was writing for the Fort Worth Weekly, she did a lot of really powerful investigations about a lot of the issues that were going on then and continue to this day. My investigation when I was with the Fort Worth Star-Telegram was in 2022, and that focused on sexual abuse and assault at the prison. And for that story, I talked to about a dozen people who were incarcerated there, formerly incarcerated, talked to family members, advocates, attorneys, and some of the staff who work there, and went over hundreds of pages of records of abuse allegations, as well as dozens of lawsuits and court testimony. So just to summarize, what I found in that investigation, to give some context of where Aafia Siddiqui is being held now, and kind of the type of facility this is. So from 2014 to 2018, based on those records that I got, I found that 35 women at Carswell reported that they were sexually assaulted by a staff member, and that is the highest number of any federal women's prison during that time. That time frame, 2014 to 2018, is so specific because the Bureau of Prisons is not particularly speedy when it comes to getting Freedom of Information Act records. So that was, at the time, the records I was able to get. We have not been able to get any updated information. I requested updated data in 2022, 2023, and 2024 and haven't gotten any more. In 2021 to 2022, there was an audit at Carswell where 14 people reported to the PREA auditors that they had also experienced sexual assault by a staff member. So that kind of gives us an idea of some of those numbers. However, those numbers don't tell the entire story. A lot of the experts I talked to discussed how in general, out in general population, when people are sexually assaulted, it can be very hard to report it. And that is even more true in somewhere like a federal prison, where oftentimes the people that you're reporting to control every aspect of your life. So that's, just one reason why those numbers might be much lower than they actually are. So for example, one woman that I spoke to for that 2022 story, Chantel Dudley, and she did use her name publicly. She talked about how when she reported her sexual assault at the hands of a case manager, then she was retaliated against by staff members and even some of the other women. There's kind of like a interesting culture among some of the people of like this like snitch culture. And so it's something that can be very difficult to report. And then even when you do report it, then that assault might not be investigated to the degree that you had hoped, or it might not be investigated at all. So, for example, her abuser, he pled guilty, admitted that he had sexually assaulted her. There was physical evidence. He was fired eventually, but he was only given a year in prison, which was half of the sentence that she was serving for drug crimes. And so even when people are convicted, which 12 staff members at Carswell have been convicted of sexual abuse since 1997, again, this is just an indication of a larger problem. And part of that problem is due to the culture within the Bureau of Prisons that staff have talked about of this tendency to want to sweep things under the rug. And one of the officers that I talked to at FMC Carswell, for example, she was the union steward at the time. She said that oftentimes that was kind of what you face when you reported any kind of issues. It seemed like there was a lot of bureaucracy that went into the decision of whether or not to look into it. And oftentimes it was, they kind of decided we're not going to look into it. So another person that I talked to who used to work there, she reported that she found out her fellow officer was sexually assaulting a woman, and she reported it, and she was also retaliated against and fired. So the reason why we're talking about that is because it shows, sexual abuse in any form is horrible. Perhaps more troubling even than that, though, is all the other factors that are going into allowing that to continue. You have this culture where an officer who does point out that something negative is happening is fired. You have a process of investigation that sometimes doesn't happen, or those investigations might be dropped because the staff member retires. Or so you're kind of this systemic pattern was emerging through my reporting of not only is this abuse happening, but it is not, the Bureau of Prisons is not being held accountable for what is going on. So all of these issues that I just brought up are present in Aafia Siddiqui's lawsuit that Clive Smith brought most recently, and a lot of the allegations that have come out over the years about her treatment at Carswell. So like we talked about, she's held in isolation, and she says that she has been sexually assaulted, physically assaulted, and her medical issues have been neglected and then exacerbated because of her treatment at Carswell. And based on, this investigation that I did, you can see kind of the thread there of perhaps she wasn't able to make a formal report about some of those sexual assaults, of the alleged sexual assaults, or if she was able to, then there was one case where she said she was retaliated against. So, and again, because she's held in an isolated unit, one of the experts I talked to said that this can kind of exacerbate all of the existing issues, because she's not even often able to talk to other incarcerated people. She is not often able to talk to her family. She has very limited contact. So that's all kind of sets the context of where Aafia Siddiqui is being held. And it also, as I'm sure we're going to talk about more, shows a larger problem within the Bureau of Prisons that has increasingly been brought to light by survivors of systemic violence within the system. So Carswell is not the only place that has these issues. Obviously, FCI Dublin, last year, all of that news that had been kind of known and had been percolating for a long time finally kind of reached the threshold of the Bureau of Prisons had to address it, and the prison was shut down. There was a historic lawsuit that led to a lot of the survivors thankfully being able to receive some compensation for that. But again, this just kind of shows the widespread pattern that all of this data and interviews show is going on across the Bureau of Prisons. And the reasons why that might be happening are, there's a lot of reasons for it that we don't really have time to go into, but hopefully FCI Dublin showed that there's possibly at least a shift in accountability happening. However, I still talk to women at Carswell pretty much every day, and unfortunately, I still talk to women who are continuing to experience sexual abuse at the facility. Even after that investigation in 2022 and a congressman called for there to be an investigation into the facility, there hasn't, at least publicly, seemed like there's been a lot the Bureau of Prisons has done to address sexual abuse at Carswell. And in terms of medical issues, that's something else that's in Aafia Siddiqui's lawsuit, is that she has a lot of medical issues from her treatment over the years, and they are not being treated. And in some cases, what's happening to her is only exacerbating or causing further medical issues, according to the lawsuit. And with medical issues specifically, I've been looking into dialysis and other medical issues at the prison for about a year or so. And I'll have an investigation coming out into those issues specifically in the next few weeks with the Marshall Project. So that's kind of just a brief overview of what FMC Carswell looks like through the lens of some of the sexual abuse and medical issues that women say is going on there, and based on the data and records that I was able to look into.
Kaylee, thank you so very much for all of that information and for your work and reporting and explaining it a little bit more. And I just wanted to make sure that people understand when you said PREA, I want to make sure that the acronym's right. So PREA is Prison Rape Elimination Act. And it is supposed to be a law that stops or lessens the sexual assault of people incarcerated. It does not work that way, unfortunately, but that is the explanation and the reasoning for the law being passed. But like you explained, it is not doing that. But again, thank you so much.
Yes, and I'm
Uh,
so sorry. I would be remiss if I didn't mention based on that, that a portion of the Prison Rape Elimination Act has been, the legal ramifications are a little up in the air, but has been either repealed or is under fire by President Trump, specifically targeting trans people um, who are in federal prisons. And that's something that I've also written recently about that is worth mentioning, that sexual abuse against trans people in prison is trans people are even more likely to face sexual assault and abuse in a incarcerated setting. And we're seeing those limited protections that they have being rolled back even further. And it's something that a lot of people are rightfully very concerned about. So thank you. Just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and move on and talk to Kendra and about her work and experience in the Dublin Prison Solidarity Coalition and kind of connect that to the issues at Carswell. So thank you very much, Kendra.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Kendra Drysdale. I am an abolitionist, and I'm also the advocacy coordinator for the Dublin Prison Solidarity Coalition, as well as CCWP, or California Coalition for Women Prisoners. I am also a survivor and someone who's lived through the worst of these federal prisons, including I spent time both in FMC Carswell and FCI Dublin, two places that we believe we're meant to rehabilitate, but instead all they do is cause more trauma. I can tell you that for those of us who have been released, are coming together, our pain has become our power, and we're standing together, united in this fight to help those that are left behind. So I will start and tell you a little bit about my experiences in Carswell and what we're hearing from a lot of our class members that are still there. So when I was there, the first thing I learned about it is that we don't call it Carswell, we call it Killswell, because that's what it does. So I know that we also heard, the Hospital of Horrors, but from the inside, what it is called is Killswell, and it lives up to that name. Many people are dying on a regular basis there. There's people that have cancer, that have all kinds of terminal illnesses that are not being treated in that so-called hospital. The hospital itself is not accredited as a hospital, but yet they treat it as if it is. So my experience from the day I got there was I have a seizure disorder, and they just refused to give me my seizure medicine. They said, "Oh, we don't give that." I'd been on it I'd been incarcerated already for 3 years when I got there and been on my seizure medications, 2 of them, and they refused to give it to me. It took me about 7 days to get my seizure medicines, and that's just a little bit of what it's like there and what everyone goes through. One of the other things that I experienced there was in the suicide watch as a suicide watcher, what they call it. I just want to tell you so you get an idea of what this place is like and what the people there are like, that work there, like the suicide watch conditions. Someone says, I'm depressed, I am feeling suicidal. They get put in a cement cell, a tiny cement cell. They're held completely naked with nothing but a hole in the floor to defecate. They are watched 24/7 by another incarcerated person who is not at all trained in any kind of mental health. They have to stare at them 24/7, but they cannot speak to them. So if the person comes to the window and has a question or wants help of some kind, they cannot speak to them, but they also cannot look away even when they're using the whole. They're given 1 square of toilet paper every time they say they need to go to the bathroom. No blanket, no mattress, just cold concrete. And it's horrific. If someone is depressed and feeling suicidal, this is not a humane way and manner in which we should treat them. They also get showers every 3 days, and they're watched for those. And if they refuse, they hose them down. Like I said, women in the hospital are dying all the time. There are people, with all kinds of illnesses, life-threatening illnesses, who are not getting adequate treatment. They are nursed by other incarcerated persons who are not trained and are completely overwhelmed. They report, I worked with a lot of the women, or I should say lived with a lot of the women that were active nurses in there, and they are saying that the women in the hospital are left in their soiled beds. They're often screaming in pain, and the nurses, the actual licensed nurses that are there, will just ignore them for hours and hours and hours. So it is actually the hospital of horrors. That name definitely lives up. Recently, our legal team met with about 100 women that were in trans that are inside Carswell. We've heard story after story of medical neglect and substandard care. People waiting months or weeks and months to be seen. There's no Spanish-speaking staff or confidential translators within the medical department. One woman, as an example, waited over 2 years for treatment of an ovarian cyst and now needs a total hysterectomy. Another had months of breast pain and now has a gaping wound exposing her implant. We're seeing lots of issues with the use of solitary confinement, especially as a form of retaliation for the women that came from Dublin who spoke out. Two of them that we met with spent over 6 months with absolutely no proper disciplinary process in the SHU. They're cut off from the outside world and legal counsel. So there's a huge culture of fear and retaliation there. The continuance of what was experienced at FCI Dublin now has transferred with them. And as a matter of fact, I can say from all of my advocacy work throughout the 13 prisons they have been transferred to, that the retaliation has gotten worse. They're very afraid to report abuse. They know it brings punishment and not help. And that is sad, and it is very, very scary. I can only imagine what it's like in what is basically solitary confinement unit, the maximum security unit where Siddiqui is held, and how scary, because at least we had, what we called our sisterhood to protect us in some ways. But without having that, I cannot imagine how horrific it would be, and what kind of treatment you would receive from the staff that feels like they have all power, and because of the ongoing cover-ups, and I'll get into that a little bit more when I talk about Dublin, but because of these ongoing cover-ups, they feel completely protected and safe in treating you in any way they want to. So another big part of the issues at Carswell is the infrastructure is literally falling apart. Every time it rains, the roofs leaks. We put buckets and towels across the entire floor of the hospital. There's mold everywhere. There's toilet paper shortages ongoing throughout the Federal Bureau of Prison. I hear this constantly, and food shortages. They say they can't afford to feed them anymore. And this hospital unit in particular has no consistent hot water. So these women are being bathed in cold water. I want to say that, in my opinion, Carswell is not broken. It's operating exactly how it was designed, and that's to disappear people. Let's move on to Dublin, aka the Rape Club. Dublin, I'm gonna just give you a little bit of a context here just from a personal experience, but Diana will tell you a whole lot more about Dublin's history and all of the work that the advocacy CCWP has done as far as advocacy and the class action lawsuit and all of those things. So, but it's built, on fear and silence for 30 years. There's been reports of sexual assault going on there, and nothing has been done to stop it or protect anyone in there. Personally, I reported a sexual assault, and what followed for me was extreme retaliation within an hour of reporting, which I was told was a space to report it. It was supposedly a safe email that would go outside of the Bureau of Prisons. It would never be reported, I was told, inside the prison. And this is when I first got there during orientation. They explained that if you need to report a sexual assault, this is how you do it, and it will never be reported in-house. The person that assaulted you will never know you reported it. So I sent an email it was supposed to go to the DOJ office in Washington, D.C. I've since met with the prosecutors and that office, and they told me that they hadn't even received my email for a good 2 weeks after because the person who receives them was on vacation. But within an hour of me sending that email, I was seen by a disciplinary hearing officer. I was given an incident report, or what we call a shot, that said I lied in order to file a false PREA. And then I was seen by a team of officers in the office of the person I reported. And I was told, they said, "What is the one thing you want to keep?" And I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And I was crying because I was so devastated that they could say I was lying about this, especially when I knew for a fact that the cameras worked in the area in which it happened. I probably would have never felt safe in reporting it otherwise. And so they said, "What's the one thing you want to keep?" I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." They said, "Do you want to keep your phone, your email, your in-person visits? What do you want to keep?" And I said, "My phone, please don't take my phone calls. I need to talk to my daughter. She's needs her mom. Please don't take that." They said, "Okay, we're taking your phone, taking your email, we're taking your video visits, we're taking your in-person visits." And she looked at the person next to her and said, what else can we take from her?" And she said, "Oh, probably her job. I worked at commissary warehouse at the time, so they took my job. And then they also raised my points to a level where it made me not releasable." And I was supposed to, this was in September of 2023. I was supposed to go home the following month. I had a scheduled date at the halfway house for the following month. And I said, "I'm going home next month. I don't know what you're talking about," because they gave me 7 months of punishment for all of those things. And she said, "No, you're not. You're not going anywhere." And they were right. I did not go anywhere. In January of 2024, I testified as part of the class action lawsuit in the evidentiary hearings. I believe it was instrumental in getting the Judge Gonzalez Rogers, to understand the level of retaliation that goes on there when someone reports. And after that, she appointed a special master. It took the special master being there. She was only there for 10 days before they decided they didn't want the oversight and to close the prison instead. But during that week, they had scheduled to transfer me along after they closed it, along with everyone else. And it took the judge and our team of attorneys and many other people getting involved in order to say, this needs to be reviewed. She should have been home a long time ago. And they eventually overturned the incident report they gave me. They said it should have never, the new warden that was assigned said it should have never been given to me. And I never got an apology or anything, but just that they should have never received the incident report, that after reviewing the cameras, they found that what I was reporting was true. But this is after me being over incarcerated for 7 months and losing all of my privileges, rights, everything, including commissary, which, I mean, some of you may know or not know that that's your ability to buy everything from food to socks to underwear to hygiene to everything. So for 7 months, I was not able to do any of those things. And this is just, I am one small example. Happens. I witnessed it in Carswell. There was so much sexual assault going on there as well, and I have, witnessed it in Dublin as well. Dublin survivors, we carry, deep trauma, and we're trying to turn that trauma around into strength so that we can help others to not have to experience some of these things that we have experienced. I currently work as an advocacy coordinator, like I said, and so after my release, I became an advocate and I started working with the CCWP. And survivor-led events, healing spaces, public actions, policy changes, all kinds of things to help make changes within this system. I absolutely love my work. It's what has helped me heal. I don't think that I could have healed in the way that I have if I did not reach out and give back. And it's very triggering to, unfortunately, to have to communicate with everyone and hear the things they're going through still all the time. But at least I know, and they know, that we didn't just forget them, that we're out here fighting for them and trying to make these changes for them. I guess that's about it. I just want to, say again, we've turned our pain into power. We're not just fighting the system. We're trying to fight for abolitionism. There's another way. There's a restorative justice, a transformational justice way of doing this without re-traumatizing those who are already traumatized. And with that, I will pass it. Thank you.
Kendra, thank you for being here, but of course, we stand in solidarity with you and your healing, and thank you for being on the inside and doing that work. It was necessary, and you're very appreciated. We are going to, and I do have a few questions for you all. I've been writing a little bit, so I do have a few questions at the end, but we're going to go ahead and speak with Diana. Diana, I know personally, has been doing work with CCWP for many, many years. They do some amazing work in California, advocating and organizing for women incarcerated, and the work that you all did concerning Dublin was truly amazing. So Diana, can you kind of talk to us about that work, your organization, and also what you did with Dublin?
Yeah, I will try and do some kind of a summary. I mean, thank you for having this very important educational about centered on Aafia Siddiqui, but then of course extending to the whole issue of state violence against women's prisons. I want to thank you all. I really, really want to thank Kendra because, Kendra, as she just said, it's part of her healing, but it's obviously to speak about this, what she has been through, and talk about it repeatedly is incredibly painful. And so I just really, all my appreciation and respect goes out to not only Kendra, but all the survivors of Dublin that we have been working with for the past few years in the Dublin Prison Solidarity Coalition, because really they are the key to why we have been able to get as far as we have, which isn't a miracle change for the Bureau of Prison, as you all can hear, but it has accomplished some things. Before I go on to speak about that a little bit more, I do want to say that I have followed the case of Dr. Siddiqui for a number of years, just in terms of being aware of political prisoners in this country. I feel like some of the things that I think Tanya began with, that she has been so thoroughly criminalized in every way this is the way in which support is alienated. This is the reason why people don't get support, especially political prisoners, as well as others, but because they are identified, in her case, Islamophobic tropes, extreme descriptions, keep people from being willing to associate with her at all. And so I really also want to thank Tanya and everyone else who has extended solidarity to her. I think political prisoners sort of represent an extreme of the type of state violence that, well, I think all people in prison experience in many ways, but then there's a particular gendered type of state violence, which the experiences that people, women, trans, gender nonconforming people had at Dublin only, show how widespread. And I have to say, I am, I guess, not surprised, but still shockable that Carswell, which I didn't realize had had such a history of abuse, is now the quote unquote home to all these survivors from Dublin. I mean, the layers of injustice and criminality on the part of the Bureau of Prisons are endless, in my opinion. So I do want to say that in addition to, and maybe I don't know where the slides are. This is a little disorienting because I can't see the slides, but I hope that the participants in the YouTube can. So maybe there's the first slide that's up now. Yes. All right. So the thing I wanted to start with this slide, just that the work that people were doing on the inside came together with a collaboration with us on the outside. And I feel like that is the key to building resistance in the prison system, to the prison system. Because much as people on the inside want to do things, unless they have outside supporters, it is even more difficult. And so that is what we were able to do with the Dublin Prison Solidarity Coalition, is gather a number of people together, some who were advocates for people inside. And we just started to meet, and we started to visit the people, because at that time we had enough people. I mean, it was at Dublin, it was geographically possible. And that is what CCWP in general does, is that we have a strong visiting and correspondence program so that we're always trying to build with people inside. Next slide. I think I'm not going to go into all of Dublin's history. Perhaps we will share these slides with people afterwards, but there is a very long history of sexual abuse at FCI Dublin, which I personally was aware of, but then there was some kind of a hiatus for a number of years between a case where there was a large settlement in the late 90s. And then, but they went on, it didn't stop it. And the problem is that the settlements, the individual, even the convictions of individual bad actors, so-called, the guards, doesn't change the systemic nature of these places. And that is what we tried to do with the lawsuit. And so you can flip through a number of the slides until we get to the class action lawsuit filed in August 2023, because that, and so the other components, I do really want to say, in my experience, there are people inside who are willing to risk something in order to risk severe retaliation, as Kendra was describing, in order to stop this from happening to them and others. There are people on the outside, and the other ingredient in my experience is a really strong, dedicated legal team, because, you know, in this system at this point in time, lawyers are important. They are a very important bridge for advocates and people inside to be able to actually combat the injustices of the criminal punishment system. So we did have a strong group of lawyers, and we still do. And that has gotten us to the point where you can flip through the slides to, well, you can just go through more of the slides. But we have been able to get a consent decree, which is commonly known as a settlement, in for our lawsuit. The class action did represent the entire class of people who you know, were impacted by sexual abuse at Dublin. And getting a class action is no easy feat, because the government makes it as difficult as possible to prevent classes of people saying this is actually a common complaint, not just an individual complaint. But we were able to do that because of our legal team, and also because we did get a judge who I will say is trying to uphold something of the rule of law, or the best aspects of the rule of law. And Judge Yvonne Gonzalez Rogers has done that. You know, I think that is very difficult to find, a judge who will, you know, actually hear the complaints and the cause, the issues, and rule favorably. First, she ruled that there would be someone who was a monitor to oversee the conditions that continued to be so severely retaliatory, even after we filed the class action lawsuit. And then, as Kendra explained, literally 10 days after the monitor was appointed, the place was shut down. Now, this, to us, and I assume to many people who are watching now, seems like incredibly damning, that as soon as a monitor is appointed, the place gets shut down. But they came up with all sorts of ridiculous reasons for shutting it down, and they were able to do it, and they did it in the most horrible way. And mind you, as an abolitionist, I am supportive of prisons being shut down when people are in fact decarcerated, when they win their freedom, not when they're transported across the country in the most terrible conditions possible, on buses, chained, no food, being taunted by their bus drivers, thousands of miles from their families. That is not the way we are looking to close women's prisons or any prisons. That's just a form of retaliation that the state does for daring to bring up the issue of sexual assault, and for daring to suggest that prisons should be closed. That's like you know, you want prisons closed? This is what we'll do for you. Anyway, I'm not sure where we are in the slides, but I think going to the one that says, at new facilities, Dublin survivors are experiencing you know, all the terrible things that we've mentioned already, retaliatory discipline, particularly from the custody staff, who see these people as threats because they have dared to speak up. And they name that. They say it's the Dublin people, or they call them the Dublin girls or the whatever, I don't know. Kendra probably knows the actual terms they use, or I won't say them on this screen, but so and the absence of medical care, the absence of mental health care. I mean, I have heard those descriptions of what suicide watch is like, not only at Carswell, but other places, and it boggles the mind. I mean, how can anyone listen to a description like that and think that these people actually have anyone's well-being in mind? It's just horrific. And so medical neglect, mental health care, no access to outside or sunlight, these are all some of the things that people are experiencing still now. We have had certain, I guess, victories. One is that the survivors, the number of over 100 survivors who had individual lawsuits against the staff about their abuse have gotten an unprecedented monetary settlement of over $115 million. So that is really something positive. It doesn't deal with the systemic aspect, but it is people need and deserve that type of monetary abuse after what they have been through. We also now have a consent decree, which is also unprecedented. But it does, so what it does is it does set up a monitoring for 2 years, starting on March 31st, 2 years after that, for all the people who are in Dublin around the country in different institutions. So it is an opening in many ways to talk about what's happening in those institutions. Technically, it only, and this is really unfortunate, but it only applies to the Dublin survivors. So the conditions, people who were at Dublin can report abuses and that they have this access to the special monitor. Unfortunately, the people at, for example, at Carswell, who are right next door to them, experiencing the same thing, they are not covered technically by that consent decree. However, we have to hope that any attention that is drawn to the different prisons all around the country will impact other people as well. So those are a couple of things that have happened. I want to just, I guess, make a plug. Again, I hope really sincerely that people listening and also this group can help come together, can try and come together, because it's systemic, it's across the country. Carswell has been spoken of, but I am sure that ML and her experiences in prison in Missouri has many tales to tell. This is, it is rampant and systemic, and we need to work together to shut it all down. I will say one last thing, which is, I want to say two last things. One is that because they keep adding insults to the situation at Dublin, is that it was shut down and now the government wants to turn it into an ICE detention center. So even though the place is riddled with asbestos and mold and has been deemed unfit for human habitation, that is what they want to do. That's a plan. So we are working with a coalition of immigrant justice groups, and we had a very successful demonstration a few weeks ago where we had a number of survivors, including Kendra, and I made Shavira speak about Dublin, and we're hoping that maybe we will have some impact and it won't be turned into an ICE detention center. And then finally, I did want to say that we in CCWP have a campaign to close both of the state women's prisons. And our campaign is has the taglines, closure is possible, freedom is necessary. And to begin with, we had the first part, closure is possible. But then after the Dublin experience, we added the freedom is necessary, because if you close a prison and you just shunt people all over the country, that is not our idea of decarceration or abolition. So those are the two parts, and it is a visionary campaign, more so than some of our other work, which has more concretes to ground it. But we are hoping that we can plant the seed of the possibility that women's prisons we do not need women's prisons. We can free them all. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Diana. That was very moving. I appreciate it very, very much. We're gonna go into and I wrote down a few things as you all were talking and asked a couple questions. I'm going to end with you, Tanya, but I'm going to start with Kaylee. But right before I do that, I wanted to just kind of make a statement and say, the people on this YouTube, Zoom, etc., have been doing some amazing work concerning incarceration of women, and we in our world, things that are trending, things go viral, things that get all the attention. This type of work very rarely gets the attention that it needs, right? Rarely gets amplified and uplifted to where it needs to be. There are a lot of issues going on in our society, and a lot of them need attention, but this is an issue that needs greater attention, focus, support, and advocacy that does not get it because, of course, it's incarceration. So I definitely implore everyone that is watching to share the stream, to talk to your communities, talk to your families, talk to your networks about these issues of incarceration. And even if you do work in another area concerning our society, understand that everything is tied together. And these issues of incarceration do impact unhoused issues, substance abuse issues, all the things that happen in our society. These issues impact that. So please connect, stay grounded, stay informed, and stay supportive. So thank you so much. But I wanted to ask Kaylee a question really quick. Being a journalist and being a reporter, I wanted to ask you, what can other journalists, even up and coming journalism students, right? Like, how can they really get involved in these issues because of course it's not glamorous, right? I know the work that you do is not glamorous. So kind of what advice would you give to journalists and others in this area to the work that you do, but also give advice to us, like how can we get reporters and journalists interested in covering these issues, in Texas and California and Missouri and other places? So
yeah, great question. So for other journalists or people studying to be journalists who want to get involved in this kind of reporting, a couple of things. Number one, I think it's really important to have a newsroom or organization that will allow you to do this kind of reporting, because it takes a lot of time. It's not something that you're going to turn out in a week or so. It does take a lot of time and energy and requires sensitivity. And so if you are able to get your editors, your peers on board with this reporting, that's really helpful. If you're not, because sometimes that doesn't happen, and I've experienced both things, don't give up. It is okay if it takes you some time, to build these sources and to report the story. I mean, I've been working on this story about dialysis at Carswell for probably a year because it takes some time. So don't give up if it takes some time. It also it can be difficult to get in touch with people who are incarcerated, almost like it's on purpose. So some practical advice I have there is lawsuits are really a great resource. If you have access to Pacer or something, can look at lawsuits that have been filed by people in prison against their facilities, etc. That will give you that person's name and registration number that the prison's given them, and then you can write them a letter. And absolutely, you have to say, you know, you're a journalist, and like, be very honest about who you are, be transparent about what you're doing. You're, you know, looking to write a story, and, you know, ask if you can talk with them. And that's how I got in touch with a lot of people, because you can't just call someone at a facility. They have to add you on like the email system that federal prisons use. You can't add them, they have to add you. So it can be really hard to like get in touch with people, but that's why like attorneys and advocates are so important too, because they can also provide you maybe with the contacts of people who they know are comfortable speaking to the media, that kind of thing. So that's like very practical, like if you want to start talking to people at federal and state prisons, to, you know, get in touch with them, ask what the conditions are like there. And then again, make sure that you don't, I think that part of this problem too can be like in a newsroom setting where things are moving really quickly. You know, journalism famously right now is pretty, it's underfunded, and it's hard work to do those longer projects. But make sure that if you are talking to someone who is in a facility, who's incarcerated, you keep them updated. You don't, this is not an extractive process. You should not be, you know, and I know that can be hard, but if you are writing letters with someone, there's not an immediate story, you're not able to do it, just like be really transparent with them about that. So that's kind of my practical advice there. And then in terms of what other people can be doing to support local journalism, but also encourage or get in touch with reporters about these topics. I think you know, the cold email, it really does work. So, you know, there are a lot of people who they took the time to email me and made me aware of some issue that otherwise I wouldn't have known about, that, you know, my sister is in this facility and this is what she's experiencing, or, you know, my husband works at the prison and he said this. That's huge. So, you know, or you can, you know, I'm an advocate and this is what I'm hearing, because otherwise sometimes the journalists literally just don't know, like they don't know where to look and they don't know what's going on. So I think that's really important. And I'm trying to think what else. Again, you know, I think journalists are kind of often swamped and really don't often have the time to dig into things right away. So maybe like be patient if possible. And for people who just in general want to keep up with these issues, follow all of these people on social media if you have it. You know, I think Instagram, TikTok, they really, you know, sometimes that's a really good place to get information directly from people who are experiencing it. I also have Google alerts set up for Bureau of Prisons, FCA Dublin. That doesn't always get you like the direct information, but it at least can keep you aware of what's happening. So that's just a few points for me.
Thank you so much, Kaylee, for those details. Very, very helpful. Appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and ask Kendra a question, and actually, Kendra and Diana, your questions are related from both sides of, you know, this issue with Dublin and the advocacy work. From an inside perspective, Kendra, I know that and I was also an inside organizer. So it's not easy to be inside of a prison and trying to advocate and organize for yourself and the people around you. Like you talked about retaliation and, you know, all the the different manners of retaliation. I know one they used to tell us in our women's prison is, if you do this, if you complain, you won't get to see your kids this weekend. They'll stop your visits, right? And one thing, women wanted to see their children, right? So like, how did y'all, keep up the hope? How did you keep advocating, keep organizing? Because I'm sure it was not difficult. So can you talk about like what they look like from the inside?
Sure. I can say it wavered. Like I went at first when they took everything from me, I can't remember a time where I felt that broken. It just to the betrayal of having people of authority that you thought, it's in some regard that you were safe in saying, hey, this happened and it was very wrong and it's very traumatic. And so to have those people come back and tell you you're lying and take everything from you, including my visits with my child, my phone, and ability to contact anyone on the outside for that matter. So yeah, it wavered, but what I can say helped me is, like Diana said, is just knowing that we had a support system. Once I got in touch with Susan Beatty from CCIJ and Kara Jansen and all of our legal team, and then also our advocacy team. I think after the first time they came to see me and I got to sit in front of them and talk to them and just know that there's a team of very strong, amazing women that were working to help us on the outside. And I know I've heard this from so many different advocates too. It made all the difference, because you didn't feel so alone. You didn't feel so scared. You felt like there was, power in numbers for one, but also that you just had people that have the ability to speak for you and to fight for you. So that, I mean, one of the reasons why I also do like so many, am willing to do so many, things like this in media interviews, is that I had many of them reaching out to my family members and reporting from the outside of what was going on. And so that also helped, right? So that's why I feel like it's so important to the more awareness, the better. For me, and just again, for the ones that are still in there now, I hear all the time, that just thank you so much, just for, as you probably know, for still being there and still in this fight, because it is so traumatic and it is so triggering, and it's very easily, and don't get me wrong, I 100% understand when someone just says, no, I need to leave that behind me. It's too painful. I get it 100%. But so, and that's, so that's why it means so much to them when they say, thank you for not forgetting us. Thank you for staying in this fight. And that for me, is how it makes it just not only possible, but also my purpose, very much my purpose.
Kendra, thank you so much. Yes, being in a cage and feeling that loneliness, I can just imagine how much having that visit with your attorneys and the organizers, advocates really like inspired you. So thank you for sharing that very much. And it actually goes right into what I want to ask Diana, being on the other side and being that person, that organization that speaks for the people inside a prison, that advocated for these women. What really did they look like? Because I know I have done a little research and know some people with CCWP. This wasn't overnight, even for your organization, right? You all have had decades of work to get to this place to be able to advocate and support these women. So what was that process like? And just kind of tell us about, connecting with people on the inside and how important that is. And you're on mute.
Yeah. So this is our 30th year anniversary. So we've been around a little while, and I'm so glad, ML, that you know about us different ways, and very good to be in this space with other people like yourself. So I mean, it's been a process. I mean, and I think I feel like I just think that local organizations need to be built, communities need to be built in an organized way that has some capacity to sustain over time. I think that is really important because I know many, many people want to be supportive and want to reach out, but I have seen a lot of groups or a lot of people, start, but it's very difficult to sustain on an individual basis from the outside also. So we are very glad that over the years we have been able to really shift our early culture, which was much more mainly volunteers, but now we have a staff that is mostly majority formerly incarcerated people. And that also really makes a difference because it enables people on the inside to know that there are people on the outside have their shared lived experience. So all these are just many pieces. I will say, and I don't know how to say this in a positive way. I mean, we have been able to grow and we have been able to get funding over the years to be able to support and pay staff people. This next period is unknown to many of us in terms of what the impact of the terrible, terrible policies and politics from the top are and how they will have a ripple effect. And I am not saying that to discourage anyone. But I do feel myself and in general for all of us that we need to prioritize our community and our collectivity and be able to if the funding is going downward, we cannot be discouraged or let that be a reason not to continue work to really challenge the prison industrial complex, to really support people inside, because what we have built over the years is bigger than money and funding. It's a political practice that is about saying that we will not accept prisons and carceral systems as the definition of how we treat people in our society. And the way to deal with harm, which of course, in my opinion, the harm is generated from the top. And then that trickles down. No surprise that people commit harmful acts, unfortunately. So I don't know. That's more of a philosophical answer, perhaps, than you were looking for. But it is something that I feel is overall, we just need to, well, our motto from the beginning, and CCWP has been caring collectively for women prisoners, which is the same as our initials, CCWP, and that collective care is going to be more important now than ever in the coming period.
It very much is. Collective support and care is vital in this next upcoming future. So thank you so much, Diana. Tanya, I wanted to turn to you to close us out a little bit more on Dr. Aafia, but I wanted to say really quickly, someone did ask in the chat about how to correspond with Dr. Aafia Siddiqui, and so there is a email address, and it is lettersforaafia@gmail.com. In letters, the number 4, AAFIA @gmail.com. And there is someone monitoring that Gmail address that will then send those letters into her. And I'll say this really quickly. Getting correspondence, mail, and emails inside of prisons, especially federal institutions, is not easy. Like, for instance, writing people a letter, there are certain things that you have to put on the envelope, certain things you have to do. So a lot of times, if you don't know what you're doing, the letters will be rejected. But also, as Kaylee said earlier, with their email system, the person inside has to add you. You can't just start, emailing them. It is like a go-between service, so they would have to add you. So I do appreciate Tanya or whoever set up this Gmail address in order to be able to get Dr. Faya some letters. So it's letters for Faya at gmail.com. But Tanya, talk to me about, what you really want people to take away about Dr. Aafia Siddiqui. I know this political prisoner situation is not, everybody in federal prison, of course, but this has some ramifications for us all. So kind of talk to me about what you want us to take away from her case, and also how can people keep following, supporting, and learning more?
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate your question because, whenever this program came about, ML, you were the first person I called, and especially with Aafia's case, a few months ago, to just get people, there's such a, I don't know if the word is a disconnect, but there's such a difference, in terms of visibility when it comes to how much people know just everyday common people. So in Pakistan, she's considered the daughter of the nation. And so oftentimes, if you Google her right now and then click on the news, category, then you'll see articles about ongoing hearings in the Islamabad High Court that's, ongoing. But here it seems like there's not much information that is widely shared, or there's not I guess, a lot of conversation about her in the category of political prisoner. And so whenever I think about her case, and I guess I cannot help but think about it in sort of partnership with how I grew up. So with the global war on terror, as everybody knows, it had a pretty huge impact in terms of, national security, and then also with how people are treated, like Diana had mentioned, Islamophobia. And so there's always been this sort of hesitation. It's less now, but in the earlier days, her name was shared through whispers and not, oh, this is a person, but we can't say too much, about what's going on with her. And so what I want people to know about her case is that she is somebody who's gone through extraordinary harm and violence, and she's here. I mean, whenever I talk to people, especially in Texas, a lot of people are not aware, of course, about her case, but then also Carswell is on a military base. I mean, these are things that I think it's hard to wrap your head around because it's not something that's presented to you every day. And so her sort of trajectory of being in Pakistan, being kidnapped there, then being taken to Afghanistan, then, having her trial in New York, then being, shipped to Fort Worth, Texas. I mean, that is something that should be shocking to everybody. And I think also the time is now to advocate for her, to seek justice, to demand justice for her, and also to understand that her case is one of many, like what Kendra shared, what Kaylee, her investigative work, Diana's work. It shows that it's a larger issue. And so while we advocate, of course, to free Aafia Siddiqui, thinking about what it means to shut down Carswell or to shut down prisons, I really appreciate the work that the FCI Dublin survivors are doing, because it shows that, and what Diana was saying, what Kendra was saying, is that it's not enough to shut down a prison. So Carswell being the only federal medical center for women I think people should be paying attention to what's going on more so than we have in the past. And then really thinking about when we talk about strategy, what does it really look like? If that is the way that we're going, then what would that actually take? And like Diana had said, it's not an overnight process. So I want people to understand Aafia's case as her being a person and also fitting in this larger issue of abuse and neglect that happens on a daily basis. And to support, the best way to do it is to follow the Aafia Movement Instagram account. They're super active on social media and they post updates you can read about what's going on in Pakistan right now, and then also just kind of the, I guess, evolution of the advocacy work. So we did a clemency campaign, while Biden was in office. And if you do want to get involved, I think that that's the best place to look. And then to write to her, like you had mentioned, ML, these letters are super important. And Clive is the one who set it up. It'll go to him. And then whenever we visit, then we'll share that. I do visit her. I didn't want that to be the focus of what I talked about, but she does appreciate letters.
And again, that's Aafia Movement on Instagram. That's AAFIA. Just want to
Yes.
make sure everybody, and you can learn. Someone in the chat asked about learning more, so please follow that Instagram. There's also a website, and you can definitely learn, read more, and read all of the updates as well. And Diana also wanted to make sure everybody who was interested in reaching out and corresponding to the survivors of FCI Dublin, please email info@womenprisoners.org, and you can connect with them that way, and the organization will put you in contact with those survivors. So those are the two ways to get in touch and support the survivors, as well as Dr. Aafia Siddiqui. I think we're going to go ahead and end. I wanted to thank everyone who joined us via YouTube, people who stayed around, asked questions, or want to learn more. Thank you so much, and we encourage you all to do so. Thank the panelists as well.